prepared to keep dying. Hello, welcome to the next chapter of the rapid reviews for 2022 movies. For those that are new, I am juggling a bunch of reviews from movies that I saw last year in chronological order, as well as the movies I am seeing this year. Obviously, I do not have time to see every single new movie that's coming out. If I did, I would never get the series done, but I'm doing the best I can to, of course, catch up with all the movies that I wanted to release last year. I'm doing it now, whatever. Those that are new, welcome. Welcome to the cult. Very loving here, somewhat. I hope that I can sap up and waste the next few minutes of your life with mindless entertainment. That way you can go back to the rest of your day, contemplating why you wasted the few minutes of your precious time while watching me. I'm going to try to segment this video a little bit more, just to be organized, because I do have a lot to say about this particular movie. I'm going to dedicate perhaps the last few minutes of the video to discuss any spoiler stuff that stuck with me and stuff that didn't stick with me. So spoiler warning. With that being said, let's get into it. My history with the Caped Crusader. Ever since I was little, Batman was always one of my all-time favorite heroes, mostly because he's just a man that doesn't have any generic superpowers, copy and paste powers that so many other heroes from both Marvel and DC, and any other third-party heroes. The idea of just having a normal man do some deranged stuff on his own was always so much more intriguing to me. Never read any comic books per se growing up, but I was exposed to all the different types of video games that were centered around Batman, as well as different television shows that I grew up watching. As I pushed my teens, I got around to watching all of the different iterations and different versions of Batman that we have gotten every single decade at this point for the last 40 plus years. From the gothic nightmarish tone of the Tim Burton movies with Michael Keaton, from the toy selling merchandise franchise, from the Joel Schumacher Batmans with George Clooney, to the more gritty and grounded versions of Christopher Nolan's Batman and Christian Bale, and of course to the alien saving version of the Zack Snyder verse with Ben Affleck. All of these different versions of Batman I have seen, well, most of them I've been able to see some enjoyment out of it, and I was able to appreciate just how different each version of Batman have been. So when the news are announced that a new Batman is going to be worked on with a whole different crew of filmmakers, a part of me is excited, of course, because I am just always interested to see what if they are hoping to do a different approach with Batman and to tackle a different branch of what he is known for, because there are so many different elements to his character, both in Bruce Wayne and as the Batman. My most recent nostalgia memories for the Batman have been from the Arkham games, though, from Rocksteady. So a good amount of my understanding of the Batman lore, the Batman universe, and all the characters that are in the Batman world are from those games. Let me just rephrase. You are not hearing this review from a dedicated diehard Batman fan. I am just here focusing on this movie as a movie on its own and not considering any other forms of medium to give me a biased opinion on the movie from the beginning. I'm going to give just a very quick synopsis of the movie's plot for those that haven't seen it yet or those who just plan to not even see it. It's only been 2 years since this version of Batman has been Batman, so he is very new to it and he is still getting established with the Gotham City Police Department as well as the other criminals that are in Gotham City, so he is not exactly known. He's starting to build his name a little bit though, a little bits at a time through each crime and through each action that he takes. There's been mysterious coordinated deaths of Gotham elite, starting with the mayor of Gotham, all caused by the Riddler, who goes onto a killing spree in an attempt to send a message to both the police and to Batman just how corrupted the source of the city is and just how everybody in the city has been corrupt, and of course how tragic the world has been to him. Oh, boo-hoo. The world sucks and I need to express that out through violent, cruel actions. Yes! Of course, being a commentary on how the elitist class works in today's world.
Of course, while the elitist class stays rich and safe, they leave for the poor and working class to struggle their whole lives and just to continue building the city into a cesspool, essentially. Obviously commentating on those in higher positions of power that make promises, but of course never deliver and only look out for themselves and not for the people they swear to protect.
Through different mobsters in the city, those like the Penguin and other supporting mobsters, they are all in part of a system that the Riddler is trying to basically out and expose to the rest of Gotham. Batman gets entangled with Catwoman, who has her own side vengeance tale with these mobsters because they screwed her over. These two will go onto a wild goose chase throughout Gotham City to find out who the Riddler is and why he is conducting all of these murders. This is more of a crime drama, more so than an action-packed movie that you would expect from a blockbuster title like this. The movie's story and execution certainly reminded me of Seven from David Fincher when it came to the whole mysterious, disturbing murders and basically taking a more dramatic approach to it instead of a lightheartedness. It's very dreary, it's very serious, it's very dark in tone. In typical fashion, the Riddler gives himself up in the last-ditch attempt to have his dedicated followers do a coordinated attack, of course, onto a special event that Gotham hosts. But like any other villain in these movies, they ultimately get their plans foiled by Batman as well as his new allies alongside Jim Gordon and Catwoman. Gotta play his little game to capture him, basically. So let's start off with what most audience members will notice at first glance. The movie is beautifully shot. It is noir style. It's very much reliant on very heavy shadows and blacks, where the only source of color we get are from the rising or setting suns, which bring about a mixture of red and oranges. Since the movie takes place mostly at night, the city's sources of lights will come from the neon lit signs of the alleyways and just the dark rainy streets. It looks absolutely incredible. We have never seen an iteration of Batman be this dreary and dark, and that is of course a compliment to the character's legacy. All the comics that I've briefly have glimpsed over and all of the different television shows and animated series that I've seen, Gotham City as a whole has never looked this real and looked this grounded in reality before. Even in Christopher Nolan's movies, where you can clearly tell that it's New York in a way, this looks like a legitimate new city that doesn't exist anywhere. It looks like a good mix of Tim Burton's extreme gothic designs as well as Christopher Nolan's more grounded realism approach to an urban city. Few shots I would have personally liked to maybe have seen a little bit more of the subjects because of how dark it is sometimes. From behind the scenes footage, you can see that it was certainly intentional to make the movie this dark and post-production coloring. That's just a little nitpick for me personally. I just would like to have seen, instead of squinting in the theaters trying to see like what I'm looking at, what am I looking at? But again, for a world and city that is notorious for how dark it is, it looks just like Gotham City. It is so unbelievable how amazing it looks. It looks just as real and depressing as it did over in Batman Arkham Knight, which to me personally is the best iteration that I've seen of Gotham ever in any Batman media. I think this damn near takes the cake with it. Greg Fraser and his whole team did an incredible job shooting and lighting this. And alongside the cinematography, it wouldn't look as good as it did if it wasn't for the production design. From all the exterior rundown streets to the gothic architecture in the interiors and the exteriors of certain buildings, can't imagine how much time was dedicated into putting this much detail into what is essentially background sets for a good amount of the shots. So when it comes to the music, both in the licensed soundtracks as well as the originally performed and written soundtrack, the choice of the licensed music is similar to that of the promotional trailers that we've gotten in the past few years. That one Nirvana song that constantly played in the trailers, it is also played a lot in the movie here. I don't mind it because the whole setting as a whole, it kind of reminds me of the setting that Joker took place in, where it was a 1970s New York setting. So it kind of reminds me of just like an older time Gotham City and not one that is modern day. Therefore, this sort of edginess to the music certainly brings character to the world and it accompanies it and doesn't distract, or it's not a heavy contrast to what we're seeing on screen. It's certainly the music that anybody's personal teen would just worship and play nonstop in their rooms while they lock their bedroom and just complain and cry about how terrible their life is. So, very thematically appropriate, you can say, with this movie. If there were other licensed songs in there, they were certainly similar to that one Nirvana song. So again, they just accompanied it and just complemented the tone overall. Obviously, when it comes to this, it's always more interesting to see what an original composer can do and not just use all licensed music. So I'm glad it's at least a mix of the two and not just licensed songs. The original tracks from Michael Gnocchi. There's certainly a lot of build-up in brass. It's very menacing. It gives the impression that something big and looming is coming to get you. It just feels like an organic mixture of everything that every other composer has done for every other iterations of the Batman movies. So it certainly feels refreshing enough, but it's familiar enough to listen, hear it, and be like, that is Batman. So let's get into the nitty-grittiness of what I personally liked and disliked about the movie. I like how they really double down in showing just how inexperienced this version of Batman is. Every other version of Batman we've seen, they have shown that they are an expertise in different branches. Where we had the crime-fighting Batman of Michael Keaton, we had the goofy womanizer. Was he a womanizer in the Joel Schumacher? I don't know. I haven't seen them in a while, and I do not want to see them again. Definitely not. We have the ninja/tactician of Christian Bale's Batman, and we have just the brooding brawler of Ben Affleck's Batman. So with this one, this is certainly the route of Detective Batman, this one, but besides that, this Batman is so much more vulnerable. He's so different than any other version we've seen before. He's so inexperienced. He lets his emotions take over at times, even more so than any other Batman that we have seen. We see him stumble and mess up. He actually never even is the one to capture the Riddler. He is actually partially responsible for one of the deaths that occur in the movie from Riddler. This Batman gets shat on and he messes up a lot. And I actually like that. He's not the complete methodical Caped Crusader yet. It's confirmed that this movie is already getting 2 more sequels, so of course we the audience are going to see Robert's Batman just become the methodical version of Batman that we all know and love. I appreciate the decision to not do the same blatant origin story that we've seen countless times already with the death of his parents. This is the most detective version of Batman that we have ever seen. The most that we've seen of Detective Batman have certainly been from the Arkham games, but never did I think that they would go full balls to the wall with it in a feature live action movie. If other versions of Batman didn't exist prior to this one, I can see myself as well as many others probably being upset that it's just too boring to watch and that we demand more action-packed Batman, but we already have those other Batman movies. We have those other Batman to go back and rewatch and see those different types of Batman. After so many iterations, I'm so open-minded to see a detective version of Batman, a more genius cop basically. It can certainly be bland and boring to some, and I can get that and I can understand that, but for me who enjoyed Seven of course and enjoyed this sort of gritty crime drama, I can certainly enjoy it here. Now, Paul Dano is fantastic in everything he's been in. I don't recall ever seeing an underwhelming or poor performance from him before in any movie. So it's no surprise here that he gives an astounding, creepy, and disturbing performance. But what is more surprising on how they were able to actually write and make Riddler actually scary. He was creepy and he was legitimately at times terrifying. Matt Reeves was one of the writers for the movie, but credit to the other writer as well for making Riddler's dialogue stand out and making every single scene that Riddler is in just so engaging. Colin Farrell as Penguin surprisingly brought some form of levity in comparison to the other talent and characters in this movie. Not just straight up Marvel level of cracking jokes, but he brings about the levity that you would expect from a character as crazy as the Penguin is. And oh my god, the makeup on Colin Farrell, god, I'm pretty sure he's Irish. I could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure he is Irish, but my god, the makeup and his voice performance, you cannot recognize that this is Colin Farrell. You were just watching constantly him on screen and being like, that is not Colin Farrell. That is not Colin Farrell. There's no way. But it is absolutely insane how that is actually him. So the makeup team absolutely knocked it out of the park there, and it's just again terrifying just how damn good makeup is getting in movies nowadays. Even though it is more of a crime drama, we don't get as much action as we would get in comparison to the other Batmans that we have gotten, but the action sequences when they are going on, they are so well choreographed and they're so brutal to watch, and it's just always a joy to behold. The Batmobile chase and everything, it all looks fantastic. Always good highlights to sort of wake us up in the movies for sure. I just wanted to go over the themes that stuck out to me and what I believe the movie is about. So the first one, when it comes to the character that is Gotham City. Of course, a big metropolitan city like this that has been built over many generations of families and rich people, they will always have corruption. Families, friends, and civilians alike will pass on that corruption for future generations to come. And it seems to be just an endless cycle. Politicians, law enforcement, and civilians, there's always going to be those that are corrupted within those three that will always look to benefit themselves and not the people that they sort of protect, or even those around them for that matter. Bruce Wayne keeps on repeating on how he questions whether his actions are even making a difference of this city because it is just so much more grand than what one man can do. Therefore, the idea of becoming a character so infamous as the Batman that can just spread fear throughout the city without him being everywhere, that has always been identified with the character. The other one, this one applies for Batman and the Riddler. This one is holding on to grudges and letting the past define what you are and who you are now will only collapse you down a spiral of bitterness and deceit. When they establish and discuss Bruce Wayne's parents' death and how it's still very fresh in his mind and how he is letting that fuel his anger and rage towards the other criminals, just like the ones that killed his parents, he is letting out his vengeance towards those people now. As for the Riddler, we find out that he was also an orphan just like Bruce Wayne, but he is so much more bitter about it because he was poor and didn't have money. The world and the city of Gotham has treated him poorly and has treated him like a complete outcast, just simply because of the elitist class system. So of course he wants to get back at them by slowly coordinating kills to bring the city down and make the city just as miserable as he is. And of course the last one, the ideology of who Batman is. At the very end of the movie, like after the climax of the movie into the third act, we discover that Batman needs to be more than simply vengeance towards the criminals of the city. Of course that's always been the funnest part to watch. It's always been fun to see him be the brooding force that criminals fear. Something that the movie also reminds us, and also that reminds Batman, is that he also needs to be a beacon of hope for the innocents of Gotham City. He needs to not only just be vengeance, he needs to be more than vengeance. And I think that's a great message, and I think that is so accurate to how I personally have always seen Batman. He wasn't just, he mostly is that looming dark presence. By the end of the day, he's not a villain, he's not an anti-hero, he is a hero. I'm going to take these last few minutes to discuss the problems with the movie for me, the elements of the story, and just anything else that didn't stick with me personally. Even though I could acknowledge and understand why people would enjoy these aspects of the movie, I completely respect anybody's opinion of it, and I acknowledge and respect the filmmakers' further attempts in what they were trying to say and what they were trying to accomplish. These are just the things that personally, me, again, this is my stupid little opinion on the internet. You can disagree with something and still respect it, right? That's the thing. The distinction between Robert's Batman and Bruce Wayne is non-existent, or it is very limited. Every time we see Robert being Bruce Wayne, he's still the same mopey, edgy, dire character. He still is Batman, just in his regular, everyday clothes. I understand that with the movie's long runtime, it was either cut from the script, or maybe even the theatrical cut we got has missing scenes. Anything that is missing that has to do more with seeing Bruce Wayne. I would have certainly preferred to have seen more of Rob's Bruce Wayne, potentially. More so than the rather bland and underwhelming supporting mob characters that we got here. If they wanted to trim down the movie to 2.5 hours long, that would have been fine, but because I still personally wanted to see more, I would have been fine with the same runtime that we have now, but still seeing them juggle more of Bruce Wayne in there as well. By the end of the day, Bruce Wayne and Batman are two different sides of the same coin, whereas Bruce Wayne is of course the fake facade. The billionaire playboy that we see is the complete bullshit side, or fake facade side. Who he really is Batman. So the next point is, I love John Turturro as an actor. I love the performances I've seen from him in the Coen Brothers movies that he's been in, but I feel like his character's presence overall here was very underwhelming and very bland to watch. I wasn't engaged with his connection with Catwoman. I wasn't engaged with the threat that he was. I just didn't feel it. I personally wasn't into it. This version of Bruce Wayne's parents that we saw, they were not shown at all, and if anything, they were revealed to be at fault when it came to Bruce's father being part of this elitist class system. As his mother, interesting enough, this version of her was that she was crazy and was going in and out of whether, I believe it was Arkham, or it was just any other psychiatric ward hospital that was in the city of Gotham. Either way, those story elements alone aren't the issue here. The issue is that we never see any of this. We are just told constantly just how significant these characters were and leaving an impact with the characters that we have now on screen. It's sort of the double-edged sword of not showing Bruce's parents for the first time. It's nice not seeing his parents get killed off for the billionth time, but it's also an issue because I no longer had any actual emotional connection to knowing what his parents were like for Bruce. Therefore, when it constantly reminds us he's still very bitter about his parents' death, I feel nothing about it because, again, we weren't never shown anything with them. We were just constantly told to care about him. It's a classic case of the movie telling us and not showing it, when it should be the other way around when it comes to storytelling as a whole, especially visual storytelling as a whole. Show, don't tell. Same applies for Alfred here. I felt like Andy Serkis, even though he's a great actor, he's given great performances before, I felt like just his character's writing was just underutilized here. We barely see him, and again, the few times we do see him, it's mostly him and Bruce reminiscing and discussing events that happened prior to this movie. Again, the movie is constantly telling us that we should care about this certain character and this certain character's actions in the past, instead of showing us why we should care about this character's action in the past. And this sort of segues into probably the biggest falter for me. The last segment of the second act of the movie is so utterly slow. For what feels like a whole 30 minutes of just conversation after conversation scenes of exposition, it had me confused for a moment. I was actually starting to look around the theater and just be like, wait, what's happening? It just kind of caught me off guard that, with such a well-paced first act that balanced a good amount of exposition and dialogue scenes with action sequences, it really struck me weird that all of a sudden we are just dedicating this much screen time to just characters interacting and talking. Even if the context of their conversations are interesting and they drive the story forward, it's rough to expect the audience to not check their clock or get bored watching just people talking for what feels like a whole dedicated act of the whole movie. It made the whole 3-hour runtime movie feel like it was almost 4 hours even, so that was the issue there with me. They just completely dropped the ball with the pacing. It's certainly a segment of the movie that I'm not looking forward to rewatching, of course. Those are basically my thoughts of it. So yeah, with that being said, I'm gonna give the rating now. 7 out of 10, engaging action and atmosphere bogged down by a slow second act. Time for my therapy session.